You're listening to the Money Mike Syndicated Radio Podcast. How we doing? How we doing? I got a very serious question I'm going to ask you. Should Nike and CaitlinClark part ways? Should Nike and CaitlinClark part ways? That's what the question is, and I want to get into it because I really have listened to the fans, listened to what the fans had to say, listened to how they approach it as they feel Nike is not doing enough for Caitlin Clark. And the question that I have is very simple. Should Nike and Caitlin Clark part ways? There's a lot of other marketing vendors out there and that can go in and service the needs of Caitlin Clark. This looks like a situation to me that I've kind of sat back and examined. Doesn't matter what Nike does, it's not going to be good enough for Caitlin Clark. And looks like that's the opinion of the Fever fans and also the Caitlin Clark fans. So here's my question because when you look at this, and really my question is for Elliot Hill. And Elliot Hill, you come on board, you're looking to do great things. Nike has done great things over the years. The partnerships that Nike has had with NBA players has been outstanding. The partnership they've had in the NBA and the WNBA grassroots of Nike EYBL. So for CEO Elliott, my question is it worth it? It's really turning to a situation. Is it worth it with Caitlin Clark? And as things go on, and you sit up in the top chair, there's no doubt about it. I mean, Caitlin's a generational player, but at the end of the day, we got to look at it collectively. And if I'm sitting in the room and they ask me, Mike, what's your thought? What's your opinion? I'm really going to tell you, it's not worth it. It is not worth it for Nike and Caitlin Clark for the relationship that they have. It's just not. It just is too bumpy, too rocky. You got everybody putting in work. You look at State Farm. You look at Kathy Engelbert. You go over there. You look at Caitlin Clark. Everybody's putting in a lot of work, okay, for one player. And that's not how the league will be successful. And you really just got to say to yourself, okay, at what point, and I know Kathy Engelbert, I can look in your eye. I hear you talking. And at what point do we separate ourselves? Because at the end of the day, as commissioner, Kathy Engelbert is not the commissioner of Caitlin Clark. Okay, Kathy Engelbert is a commissioner of the WNBA. So when you look at this and you look at collectively, you got to ask yourself, and here's where I go back to Nike. I mean, Nike has had success with many players. Nike is the most successful brand in basketball. And now the brand's not good enough for Caitlin Clark. I'm in shock. I'm totally in shock. And here's where I go with this because Nike has been doing this for a long time. And when you look at Elliot, when you look at it from a CEO perspective, and you have the swoosh, and you look at it, the Nike, the history. I mean, how is it done, and what did Phil Knight do, and the brand, and the success he's had in brand? I have never seen in my history of basketball, NBA basketball, college basketball. I've never seen the Nike brand be spoke about in a way as disrespectful as it has been done. And if you look back at Phil Knight, and as I said, my relationship, Oregon, I played football for Mike Bellotti, and he was a head coach, Hall of Fame, Oregon. And the way they do business and the way Nike treats players, there is no other university than Oregon that Nike treated them with the best and most respect. And you get back to this and you say, well, what are you saying, Mike? I'm saying that Caitlin is a generational outstanding talent. However, Caitlin may be better served by a smaller brand. Caitlin Clark may be better served by a smaller brand. And if I'm sitting in the room, why would you say that, Mike? Well, if I'm sitting in a room with Elliot, here's the deal. You know what? You got a lot of athletes. You got a lot of stars. Okay. Caitlin has potential to be one of the next stars. She hasn't done it yet. And the amount of time it's going to take to manage Caitlin Clark might be better off suited with a partnership with Reebok, Puma, Adidas, or New Balance. Or another brand that's smaller that can give her the attention she needs because Nike is the leader in the platform of sports in the market. And you got to ask yourself how much time and money is it going to be have to be invested to make Caitlin Clark successful? And we have to look at that the way with Kathy Engelbert and the way the draft and all the new players coming in. You got to look at that and say, well, is it a better investment to invest in one player or is it a better investment to invest in 24 players, right? Because all 24 players can walk in with shoe contracts. And now we have 24 players that we can market that won't require the attention. And this is something that, it was brought to my table because I've had a year to evaluate. I sat back and listened to the fans. I've listened to what everybody says. And everybody feels that Nike is not doing what it should for Caitlin Clark. And Nike is the leader in sports. And I want to really take a moment to put it in perspective because when you have a CEO like Elliott, you got to put it in perspective and you got to say to yourself, okay, where are we and where do we want to go? Okay, so let's look at you got Caitlin Clark is a generational talent, has a lot of potential, but she's not the career leader in the WNBA yet. Okay, that's 1 year. And the amount of work that's going to be required to continue this success, this is really going to be a meeting that's going to come across, and they're going to have to sit down and say, hey, is this good for us? Or do we have a better ROI looking at the other players that are futurely coming into the WNBA? Because here's what Nike deals with, and you got to understand this, and I want to put it in perspective. Okay, Caitlin Clark is not Derek Jeter, right? She's not Derek Jeter. Okay, and Nike carried Derek Jeter all the way, all the way. So you got to understand she's not Derek Jeter. You want to talk about a signature shoe? Okay, you want to talk about having something? Okay, you got to look at that, and you got to look at Phil Knight and what decisions he's made with athletes that have potential and athletes who've had more potential. Okay, let's look at it. Okay, Caitlin Clark is not Tiger Woods. She is not Tiger Woods. She's not close to being Tiger Woods. And she didn't come out of Stanford and all of a sudden win the Masters by 20 strokes. Okay. This is a different brand of what you're talking about. Okay. The next player you coming up, this is the brand under Nike. Okay. Caitlin Clark is not Michael Jordan. She is not Michael Jordan. Okay. Jordan was so good, he was able to establish his own brand. Okay. So what potentially if you look at Caitlin Clark, then Caitlin Clark would have to have her own brand like Jordan, and they'd call it Caitlin, right? You're looking at the amount of money that Nike invested prior to Michael Jordan achieving the results is astronomical. Astronomical, right? And where did this all start? It all started with Julius Erving, the ambassador, right? And Julius Erving was the ambassador that didn't complain, took what he had, stepped down, stepped from the ABA to the NBA to get this done. This is the kind of history that Nike has. And you got to look at the WNBA and the real history of the WNBA. Okay? Because now we've taken it to a level that we can disrespect the partners. And that's not good because if you look at these ladies here in the history and what they did, there wouldn't be a league today if it weren't for these ladies, right? The ones who actually played and played in arenas and played for the love of the game. Now we've gotten here, and I go back and I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked before because you got to understand something. When Elliott's got to make a decision, and you're talking about the brand of the swoosh, right? And this brand has been the leader for a long time. But all of a sudden this year, the brand's not good enough for Caitlin Clark, and I've never heard Nike get bad mouth And when you come to talking about someone's client image, I tell you the most important thing is a client image. You must keep that in mind, and you have to understand that there are other players playing in the WNBA. And that's what Wall Street asked. Can CaitlinClark survive without the WNBA? Can the WNBA survive, okay, without CaitlinClark? Yes. I mean, it works both ways. If Caitlin never played another game in the WNBA, the WNBA is going to go on. It's not going to collapse. It's not going to lose any revenue. The people are in place. Everything's in place. The WNBA will go on without CaitlinClark. That's 100%. Okay. So you have to look at that and say, well, if the partnership's not right, and they've done it right for all these years, for all these players who have played in the NBA, and they've been working under Nike for years, okay? But all of a sudden they got it wrong. And here's Elliot, okay, CEO Elliot Hill, and you got to ask yourself, and my question to Elliot, is it worth it? Is it worth it to put this much investment into one player versus transferring that investment and putting it into the new beginning of the WNBA? There are a lot of marketable players that are marketable that are going to carry this league. Okay. And Nike, this would be a discussion that we sit down, you're in the room, because you got to look at what can we do that's not going to destroy our client image, which has never been destroyed. Nike has been in this platform for years. They're experts in it. Then all of a sudden, you got Caitlin comes in the league, and Nike is no longer experts. So sometimes it's not so much that the Nike's not experts, and it's not so much the question is they doing enough or not doing enough for Caitlin. It's sometimes when you get in corporate enterprise business, you understand one thing. You understand it very well that sometimes there's clients who are not suited for the platform and architecture that you have designed at Nike, and they're better suited off with a smaller brand so they can get the attention that they need because it looks like Caitlin and everybody wants commercials. Caitlin wants more. Caitlin wants a shoe. Caitlin wants all these things designed immediately. Well, that's what one of the smaller brands can do, like Adidas, okay, or Reebok. Okay, they can make a quick shoe, but you have to understand Nike is also international and global. Okay, and Caitlin has to fall on the pecking order, and there's bigger athletes associated with Nike than Caitlin Clark. That's a fact of life. And you want to be fairness, and I call it equity, meaning that anytime you have a high profile client, you can't keep them all. I mean, every agent knows, or every C knows that boy, there's clients they wish they would have been able to retain, but they were better suited off with another corporation or vendor that better suited their needs. And I think that's what you're running into with Nike. And I think the CEO Elliott, I mean, that's going to cross the desk if it hasn't crossed his desk already, because it's a high risk that you're taking with the amount of investment that it takes to make Caitlin Clark successful, right? And that because Caitlin's not going to do it on her own. This is not basketball, folks. It's not like selling basketballs. You create some out of rubber, you put an air in it. I mean, you're talking about design, you're talking about distribution. There's a lot of things that have to go on and performed, and a lot of revenue has to be put behind it. One that you can potentially in that first year, and this is what a lot of people don't understand. Potentially in that first year, you may break even with the cost of goods and the cost of services that it took you to get there. Now your potential is going to be betting on year 2, 3, 4, 5 that Caitlin has the same success. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows that, right? Nobody knows that to this stage. And it's different for the other round because life in the game of basketball and the game of basketball on the women's side, it's not the same, right? It's not the same. So, I looked at that and I said, well, let me bring this to the table because it is a big decision for Nike. It is a tremendous decision. Caitlin, no doubt, is worth every penny, every single penny that can be placed in it, but it's getting into high risk territory because, if you just put the shoes on the market, they're not going to sell. And a lot of times on that first, second year, you're going to lose money. And then in the end, you turn around and you start making money. Okay, so this one's a risk, and Nike's got to make a decision. Caitlin, generational talent, best player, but only one player. And they're going to go about 200 players next year. And the question is, do you invest in one, or you start spreading that wealth around? And again, Nike's proven, right? You got Derek Jeter. I mean, you're proven in what you do. You know how to do it. Phil Knight is giving more and taking care of more athletes than anybody could ever imagine. And you got to put it in perspective. Is Caitlin Tiger Woods? I don't know about that one, right? You got to ask yourself, because Tiger's been around a long time and ups and downs, and Nike's always been there for him through it all, right? And you got Michael Jordan, and you got to say, hey, is Caitlin Michael Jordan? No. I mean, the potentiality when Jordan started really soaring, I mean, it was after 2 or 3 years in the league, and then all of a sudden it took off, right? So, and where did it start? Julius Erving, all the brand marketing, all the NIL. It started as the ambassador with Julius because no one was getting any sponsorships or anything like that. The history of the WNBA, we can't never forget that. That's an existing history, and we got to just make up our mind of what we're going to do because at some point, I think the WNBA has to do a tribute to the history of the WNBA and be informative to let everyone know because it was good times, bad times, and there were even times where the WNBA players didn't even know they were going to come back and be able to play or even get a paycheck, right? But Kathy Engelbert's working day and night. I mean, you talk about taking years off your life, that's pretty much it. I mean, because every time she wakes up in the morning, there's a problem or a phone call or something goes awry, right? So you just got to put it together. But that's my question because at the end of the day, you got to do what's best. CaitlinClark's CaitlinClark. And when I looked at it and I looked at Collective, I looked at Elliott Hill, you know what? It's a big mountain to climb. And the question, Elliott, is do you want to climb this mountain? CaitlinClark, the investment and the return, the ROI, and what is it going to do as far as how do we cross-sell that into the rest of the players you have in the WNBA? That's what CEOs do. That's what they get paid to do as the big bucks, but it's never an easy task. And to Nike CEO Elliott, hey, I understand. I get it. This is the Money Mike Syndicated Radio Podcast. We close up with the first initial question. Should Nike and CaitlinClark part ways? Is it mutual in the best interest for both parties where Nike can service the amount of athletes that it has and CaitlinClark can move to a smaller brand that can better suit her daily needs and make sure she is accommodated for? All things are possible. This is the Money Mike Syndicated Radio Podcast. We are powered up by Fanatics and shop till you drop. We'll see you soon.